All right. About time for us to begin here. I realized I haven't uploaded the last couple videos to YouTube. I don't know if you guys look at those at all, but I'll do that today, hopefully. So we were beginning to talk about education and research on education issues. And we started that by reviewing what we've already learned about education a little bit in this class, or at least what we learned about how functionalists look at education. We talked about the functions of education, both manifest and latent. And the one we ended with, but I didn't get to say enough about, was one we hadn't really talked about before. And that was the idea that one of the manifest functions of education is to legitimize meritocracy. And I think I explained that idea. Meritocracy is the idea that a society, ocracy means a type of society, merit means earning something, or, deserving it, and deserving it because of something you've achieved or accomplished. And so our society, we like to tell the world that we're a meritocracy, that in America you get where you get based on hard work, based on doing what you're supposed to do, following the rules, playing by the rules, and working hard. And we say to the rest of the world that, other countries or other places where people, like in India, they have a caste system that's still in effect in a lot of ways, so that, regardless of how much effort you put into things, you're still treated as less than in society. We talked about race in America, and there are some sociologists who see race in America as a little bit like a caste system, because for a lot of people, they find that their race holds them back, no matter what they do, no matter what they accomplish. People still put them in a lower category. But we try to say as America that we're not that way, that it isn't based on your caste or your class or anything that was true about you the day you were born, because you didn't have any say in those things. What you're supposed to get, where you get based on what you did after you were born, the things you accomplished in school and after school and in life. And to say that we legitimize, that the function of schools is to legitimize that idea, is to say that our schools try to make it actually a fact that you can get somewhere in America without having connections or a certain race or a certain color or a certain background or a certain family name. We provide free public education, we say, and we provide that all the way up through community college and university and grad school. And so we try to say to the rest of the world, we're not just claiming that America has meritocracy, we actually make it possible by having this thing called free public education for everybody. But we can start our discussion of education by asking, have we really done that? And so the first piece of research that I'm going to talk about is called Savage Inequalities. And it's by a sociologist named Johnathan Kozol, K-O-Z-O-L. He's again a kind of sociologist that regular folks might have read, because the books he writes them in regular English that most people can understand, and he publishes them with publishers that put them out in the regular marketplace, like at Barnes and Nobles or other bookstores. It's not the kind of peer-reviewed research. He does publish that as well. But he wants to have an effect on people's thinking about their society. He doesn't want to just talk to other sociologists, other scholars with his writing. He wants to talk to the American people. And so he's written several books about schools and about children in America and how we treat children. And there is a case to be made that, how a society treats its children kind of tells you a lot about that kind of society. So he has focused on the condition of children in America. In this particular book, it's what we would call an institutional ethnography. You've heard the word ethnography before. We've used it several times. Remember, that's a technique where the sociologist, the social scientist, immerses themselves in a group of people in some way, whether that's like a rock band like I did, or a school like some people have done. In this case, an institutional ethnography, it means to immerse yourself in a whole institution, not just a particular rock band or a particular family or a particular workplace, but the whole institution. So thinking about schools, how can you do an ethnography of an institution? What does that mean? Well, in this case, it means trying to look at all stakeholders. That's a term we use nowadays in sociology and elsewhere. Stakeholders. What's a stakeholder? A stakeholder is somebody who has an interest in the outcomes of something. So, for example, you're a stakeholder here at Yuba College. You care whether Yuba College is doing its job. If we hire terrible teachers that don't know what they're doing, we had them review me here. And, if they didn't do that, if I just got up and say whatever I want, do whatever I want, that might not be the quality education that you're looking for. And so you're a stakeholder. You literally are, because you pay money to be here, or if you don't pay money directly to be here, you pay taxes that support this school. And so a stakeholder, the original term goes back to like mining. Like if you have a place where there's gold to dig, you might have a bunch of guys all put in money to own it, and they all get to have a share of the gold that comes out of there. They all have a claim on that stake. They're claim holders, they're stakeholders. And so when we think about an institution like schools, we can ask, well, who are the stakeholders? Let me ask you that, like, who cares whether schools are doing their job? If we think of the school system here in Marysville, and we have, the Marysville, school district. We have the Yuba College School District. Let's just focus on that. Yuba Community College District, which, encompasses our school and what do we call it? Woodland, and even Lake and Colusa campus, big area. Who cares whether the YCCD is doing a good job or not? Who are the stakeholders, do you think? Can you name some stakeholder groups? So students are one big group, and we want to make sure they're happy. If they're not happy, a lot of bad stuff can happen.
Maybe the parents?
Parents of students, a lot of them are the time the people paying, and especially if we're talking about K-12, which is what he focused on. K-12 means kindergarten through high school, so not the higher education. But yeah, community colleges are kind of within the K-12 system in a way. So parents, are definitely a stakeholder, but they are for universities too. My daughter goes to UCSB, and definitely parents are big stakeholders in how, like right now with protests happening on college campuses, there's a lot of parents worried about what's happening to their kids there. And my daughter said she went out to the protest, but she didn't want to stay overnight in the campus, so she just bought some groceries for her friends that were there. But anyway, other stakeholders you can think of? Who cares whether the schools are doing a job?
The school president.
So the administration and other employees of the school, who else? So we're thinking of groups, not necessarily individual people. But what groups in society care in this community here? Who cares whether Yuba College is doing its job or not? Teachers, so the faculty, we're employees of the district. We want to make sure the district is doing its job and that we're doing a good job. And faculty keep tabs on each other. You may not know that universities are supposed to be run with something called shared governance. So it's not supposed to be that faculty are just employees of the university, of the college. We're supposed to help run it. And that's why we have like a faculty senate here, and we have other ways that we work with the administration to run the place. Other stakeholders, who else cares if we're doing a good job here in this community? What does it matter if Yuba College, why don't we all just drink beer and listen to mariachi music? I mean,
Are there like universities?
other universities, so other schools that we feed into, Davis cares, Chico cares, Sac State cares whether we're doing our job. Who else? trying to get you to think here. I do too much of the talking in this class. That was one of the things, by the way, they said in their review of me. You talk too much and then you don't let them talk. Like you ask a question and then you answer it. Just wait and let them answer it.
Maybe like future employers?
Yes, exactly. So the business community is one of the big stakeholders in terms of especially universities and colleges, because you guys are feeding directly into the workforce. And using this term, feeding, I think helps us think, like a functionalist. We think of how one school feeds another. So the high schools feed the college feeds the universities, and the employers. And so there's these different systems all working together. So how do you study that? I mean, how can you immerse yourself? Remember, to be an ethnographer really means to be up close and personal. It's a qualitative method. It's not just standing back crunching numbers. It's getting up and close and personal with people and talking to people and understanding them. Remember, ethnographers try to understand the meaning of things, not just, how things work structurally, but what they mean to the people inside those things. So he studied the New York school system, New York City, NYC school system. That's not the entire education institution. If we're talking about education as an institution, we really mean the whole United States, because that's the society that we're studying here. But that's, like I say, a big, huge thing to try to do an ethnography of. But you could study one particular district, one particular school system, district, and that would give you a sense, just like we were talking about, of an institutional kind of thing, because it isn't just one school, it's a system, and it's fed by a number of other systems, and it feeds into a number of other systems. New York City is the biggest public school system in the country. If you count how many students it manages, it has the most. And it's 5 boroughs. If you know how the city of New York is organized, it's organized into 5 big boroughs. So there's Manhattan and Long Island and Brooklyn and Queens and Staten Island, and so they are all part of the same school system. It's a huge area with many millions of people. And he decided, I want to study it ethnographically, which means getting to know all the stakeholders, getting to know the students and their experiences of the schools, getting to know the parents and their experiences with the schools, getting to know the employers and their feelings about the schools, getting to know the administration, the faculty, the staff. We didn't talk about staff, but the people that work at a school that aren't the teachers or the administration are a big stakeholder. And he wanted to kind of get a sense, how do all these different groups see the school system? How do they, if you were trying to understand the school system ethnographically, you need to really try to see it from all angles, from below, from above. How do the administrators see it? How do the lowest janitors see it? I mean, I shouldn't say low, but lowest paid and things like that. And he spent a year doing this. And at the end, again, like other ethnographies, you don't necessarily have a particular research question in mind. You're immersing yourself, and it's called inductive. In other words, a lot of studies are deductive, where you have a premise or a thesis that you're trying to prove. But in qualitative work, you're not trying to prove anything, you're trying to find out stuff. So instead of deducing, you're inducing, taking in information and trying to understand it better. And so and after a whole year of doing this, what does he come out with? What are the key things that are the sort of findings or themes that come out of his study? The biggest one is what he calls the vision. Well, first of all, there's savage inequities. In school funding. So the overall thing that jumps out at him after a year of studying these schools is how unequal they are. how if you're in, say, Long Island, one of the richer parts of New York City, and you go to their public schools, you'll find brand new buildings with computers on every desk and teachers that know how to work the computers, teachers that know how to train students in programming the computers. So when he spent his days at Long Island, high schools, it's a brand new building, everything's fresh and clean, all the kids are working on computers, they're programming them and stuff like that. On the same day, on the exact same day that he's observed all this, he also went to the South Bronx, which is across town, a totally different part of New York City, a much poorer area. South Bronx is where hip hop was born. It's a heavily African American, poor area. And over there, the school, again, public school, same district, same funding, same funding sources anyway. But that school doesn't have computers. There was like one computer at the school, and it's broken. And there's tiles falling off the ceiling. And the kids are shivering in the wintertime on the day he's there because the heat doesn't really work in the school. And he also recalls, I also went to that school later in the year in the hot days, and the kids are like sweating because the AC doesn't work. And so how can it be that we say that we're America, a society where we're a meritocracy, it doesn't matter who your parents are, everybody gets an equal education because we all get to go to free public education. And in one particular system, we're seeing, kids, just because they were lucky enough to be born to rich white parents on one side of town, get to have a brand new school with fresh computers and everything and teachers that know how to use them. And other kids who had the bad luck to be born to poor parents on the other side of town, they get nothing. That's not equality. That's not giving everybody the same chance to succeed. That's not a competitive society where these guys over here are getting to compete with these guys over here. These guys were born on third base already and they're hitting a home run. These guys are born, in the dugout, and can't even get up to bat. If I can use a baseball analogy, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about with baseball, but and so he says this is just not what we say, what we claim. We claim as a society that we're giving equality, and we're not. And I'm sure that it's not just New York City. If you think about your own schooling experiences, and sometimes it can be hard because if you haven't done the ethnography, you haven't seen all the different sides. But just think of Yuba College District. If you're unlucky enough to live over here in Marysville, you get to go to this school. We have nice tiles on the ceiling. We have Wi-Fi that doesn't really work in here because it's all interfering with other Wi-Fi in other places. They had to demolish this building, they had to redo. I think one of them they had to close completely for a while, 500 building, because the HVAC and stuff like that didn't work right. And there was asbestos stuff and things like that. And meanwhile, if you're lucky enough to live in Yuba City and be born in Yuba City, you could go to the Sutter Center over there. That's brand new, fresh, award-winning building. And a lot of the best teachers, by the way, live over in Yuba City, and they don't want to come over the bridge, so they're teaching over there. Over here, you get stuck with guys like me. And so that's, it's not equal. And that's our own district, or even just on this campus. Just look at the nursing. If you're studying nursing, you get a brand new building with all kinds of new, fresh stuff. If you're studying English or social science, you get this over here. So it's not equal, and there's different reasons why nursing gets so much funding and sociology doesn't. But really, it comes down to this: there's a vicious cycle of school funding. So here he has to kind of go beyond his ethnography, because if you want to understand what you're seeing in these schools, like crumbling buildings in one place and fresh fancy ones in another, you can't just talk to people and interview people. You have to go do some digging into the records and documents behind these schools and how things really work at an institutional level. A vicious cycle, as you know, is one that gets worse and worse as time goes on. And so to understand why schools are so unequal in America, we have to go back in history a little bit or try to understand, where did this cycle start and how did it get to the point where it's at? Well, how are schools funded? A lot of us don't even think about that. Where do they get their money? Do you know? Where does Yuba College get its money? Did you pay a lot of money to come here? Probably not. So who's paying my salary? Who's paying for what, cleaning up the room after I leave? You know how it works? It's a good thing to know. Most Americans don't think about it that much. School funding comes from property tax. So each state runs its own school system. There is, we'll talk soon enough about how the federal government in Washington tries to tell states what to teach and how to teach it. But in reality, each state runs its own education system. California has the California Department of Education in Sacramento, and it runs all the K-12 schools, including it also runs the Cal State system and the UC system. So it's a huge government bureaucracy that runs, a lot of the schools. And how does California get the money to run its schools? It's done with property tax. What's property tax? If you own property, then you pay property tax. So if you don't own property, you've never paid property tax. But if you own your own house, for example, you have to pay a bill every year on the property. And property tax is determined by what? By the value, property value. Leave myself enough room to draw this vicious cycle. So the property tax is what funds the school funding. But what determines the property tax and how much a person pays? Property value. So a lot of people are obsessed with California property values, real estate values, like how much is my house worth right now? I'm gonna go on Zillow and find out how much my house is worth. People are always doing. And your property tax is based on the value of your home. So if Zillow or what's called an appraiser says, your house is worth $200,000, you pay this much tax based on that. And if your house is worth $1 million, you pay more than that. But how is property value determined? Property value, have you ever thought about buying a house? If you go buy a house, if you go to a realtor and say, I'm thinking about buying a house, they'll say, well, where do you want to buy that? You tell them, and then one of the first things they might do, the first thing they're going to ask you is, do you have kids? And if you say yes, they're going to go, okay, let me show you this, and they're going to bring out a sheet that shows you all these different neighborhoods you could live. And it's going to show you the school quality in all those neighborhoods. Why is the realtor bringing out a sheet on school quality? Why, if I'm buying a house, are we talking about school quality all of a sudden with the realtor? No idea. You guys should think about it.
That's where the kids will be going.
Yeah, and why does the realtor want to talk with me about where my kids are going?
Because that helps decide if you want to live there or not.
Yeah, parents are very concerned about the quality of the schools their kids are going to go to. And a lot of parents spend a lot of time looking at the school rankings. In fact, this week my kids are having to do what's called MAP testing in their school, and I believe the school rankings are based on the MAP testing. So the teachers are like, make sure your kid gets, enough breakfast and gets enough sleep, because their own jobs are affected by how well your kid is going to do on their test. And so property value is determined in a large degree by school quality. When I first moved to this area, we were looking at where to live, and we didn't know anything about the area. We only had one little baby at that time, and people were saying, Rockland has the best schools. You got to go live in Rockland. And we were like, yeah, but Lincoln has some affordable houses. We're looking at Lincoln. And if you were to buy in 12 Bridges, which is where we ended up buying, it's a neighborhood in Lincoln, you're close enough to Rockland that you could throw a rock into Rockland. And the houses that you're living in 12 Bridges are the exact same houses that you'd be living in if you lived in Whitney Ranch right next door. The same builders, same style of house, same basic area, same view. But how much more money does it cost to live in Rockland in that house that you can throw a rock at versus 12 Bridges? How much more do you think it was when we looked? 100,000 more. It's the exact same house, but you're gonna pay 100,000 more over there. Why? I can see that house, it's just like mine. What's the difference? The difference is Rockland schools. Lincoln schools didn't have the test scores. If you looked at the rankings, Lincoln schools are down here, Rockland's up here. So the realtor knows, and the real estate market knows, we can charge parents a premium, we can charge them more money to live in these houses over here than we can over here. I guess I'm an irresponsible parent because we bought in 12 Bridges. We're like, yeah, we're gonna spend $100,000 on. We found a loophole, a way to get our daughters to be able to go to the Rockland schools, which they did. But my point is, I'm not trying to talk about me. I'm talking about this basic pattern we have in our society. School funding determines school quality. So here's the vicious cycle. The schools that get the most funding are the schools that are gonna help their property values go up the most. If property values go up, then you pay more property tax, your school gets more funding, your school quality goes up, you get more property value, it's a vicious, for the good neighborhoods with good schools, it's a virtuous cycle. Their school quality keeps going up, their property values go up, they come to be known as a nice area with nice schools. On the other side of town, though, you get the opposite pattern. The school has low test scores. The property values don't go up, or they stay low, or they go down. The school doesn't get funding. If it doesn't have funding, it can't pay for good teachers and good computers and stuff like that. If it doesn't have good funding, it can't get good test scores. And if it can't get good test scores, it's going to get less funding. So it's going down the other way. And so you get this growing inequality between schools and neighborhoods in America, where neighborhoods with high property values have great schools and they're getting better and better, and the poor neighborhoods get worse. Now, this is such an obvious outcome of school funding policies that most states have realized, we can't just keep giving more and more money to the rich schools and less money to the poor schools. That's not helping us. That leads to what states call achievement gaps. And you start seeing them, like all the black and brown people who happen to be the poor people in America, generally speaking, their schools are low quality and poor. And then over here, the white kids have high test scores and high college admissions and stuff like that. And we go, what's with the achievement gaps? Something wrong with their brains? Well, no, you're not getting the same quality education as the other people. And so it's such an obvious inequality and unfair thing that most states have gone away from this obviously unfair system. So nowadays in California, your school doesn't get more money just because it's in an area that the property values are high. The way they do it now, the new funding is basically $6,000 per student in California. They basically say each school gets $6,000 per student per year. So if you can, as a school, show the state of California, we have 2,500 students regularly, they're regularly attending here. Then the school can multiply 2,500 times 6,000 and say that's the funding that the state of California owes this school. And so it's supposed to be based then on school size, not on what neighborhood you're in. But why do you think it's still the case, and it is still the case, that even if schools are getting the same money from the state based on how big they are, that it's still the case that if you're in a nice neighborhood, like my daughter's got to go to school in 12 Bridges, those are better schools, by the way, than the other side of Lincoln. If you go to Lincoln, the older part of Lincoln, downtown part of Lincoln, those schools have lower test scores, lower quote-unquote quality than 12 Bridges. Well, why would that be? if they're getting the same money, let's assume that, Granite Oaks or whatever they call it over there in Lincoln is, or Wood Creek Oaks has the same amount of people. Let's say it has 1,000 people, and they get 6.5 million a year, and the other one, 12 Bridges, has 1,000 people, and they get 6.5 million. So why would it still be the case, though, maybe, that 12 Bridges ends up with a lot more funding for things like teachers and computers? Where are they getting the extra money from? No, so they're getting the same tax money from the government. Government's saying you both have 1,000 people, you get 6.5 million, you get 6.5 million. Now run your school for the year. But I'm saying in reality, 12 Bridges still has way more money than that.
Could people be donating?
Yeah, parents. So if you're living in a rich area with wealthy parents, and how do they donate? That's a key thing to think about. It isn't just cash, which it often is. So I had friends that they lived in Los Gatos, a very rich area of California, and they went to public school, their family, but on the first day of school, they said everybody needs to turn in their $800 activity fee. And all the parents were like, yeah, let me just write that check. And around here, if you said everybody write a check for $800, it'd be like, $800. And so people don't have that kind of cash. But aside from cash, how is it that wealthier areas are able to provide more to their school? Well, a big difference is in 12 Bridges, there's a lot of stay-at-home moms. And in downtown poorer areas, a lot of moms work. And if you're a stay-at-home mom, you have all kinds of time on your hands to donate to the school, not cash, but, oh, you guys want a cheerleading squad? I know, I did cheerleading, I can teach the cheerleading, I'll volunteer. Oh, like I want to teach ukulele, I'm gonna start a ukulele club at my school for real, for my kids. And I'm not even a stay-at-home dad, but I have time, I'm a well-paid professional with time on my hands to do that. If I was somebody who didn't speak English and I worked a real job that was like a 9-to-5 job or more with, low pay, and it was hard, physically hard, I might come home from my long day at work and not have time or energy to volunteer for the school and not speak English and be able to really help. And so it's just the case that in this richer, more suburban area with a lot of stay-at-home soccer moms, the school has more money. Another reason that you might not think about is richer people like to live in newer neighborhoods. And so when new neighborhoods get built, a lot of times people leave their old neighborhoods and go live in the new neighborhoods. Well, the new neighborhoods also build schools, and the schools are fresh and new with new everything. In the older neighborhoods, the schools are older, the buildings are older. And if the buildings are older, it's a lot harder to maintain the buildings. So if you're in an older part of town, your school's gonna have sewage problems, it's gonna have tiles falling, it's gonna have heating and air conditioning problems. In the nice part of town, in the newer part of town, the building's brand new, so the neighborhood, the school district isn't spending money just keeping the school working. It isn't spending money on HVAC, it's spending money on computers, on new teachers, on a cheerleading squad. Whereas the school on the other side of town, in the poor area, they're spending all their budget on just keeping the tiles from falling, on keeping the AC working, and so they don't have money for computers, or for a theater program, or for a ukulele club, or these other things that really enrich the school and make it a fun place to go and a fun place to be and a welcoming place. If you look about Yuba College, they've been trying to beautify it, but for many years here, it just was such a gross thing to come to. And you're like, is this what we think of the people of Marysville? This is the best we can give them? And it isn't because the people here don't want to have a nice college, it's because they don't have the resources to make it happen. And so even though the funding now is supposedly equal for a variety of reasons, it's just the case that we still have very massive inequalities between the rich schools in richer areas and the poor schools in poor areas. And so why don't we try to change it? So his ethnography, he experienced this inequality, like shivering in the classroom on one side of town and seeing all the computers humming on the other side of town in the same day. But he also went and talked to people about like how have things changed over time. There's only so much an ethnographer can observe in the moment when they're observing. But if you can interview people about how were things 5 years ago, 10 years ago, where do you see things going in the future, then you can add more to the picture. And he says one of the reasons New York City hasn't addressed this massive inequality is because of vested interests, he calls them. I would call this, another way to put it is the secession of the successful. I don't know if I'm adding too much here, but in America, one thing we've seen happen is our richest people have kind of abandoned the rest of us. Secession is what the South did in the Civil War, when the Southern states said, we're gonna leave the United States, we're gonna be our own country. Well, in a lot of ways, the rich people of America have kind of seceded from the Union. A lot of them live in gated communities, or they keep their wealth in offshore accounts where they don't have to pay taxes, or they send their own kids to private schools and they live in privatized communities. So a lot of the richest people in America don't really have to deal with the rest of us. Their kids don't go to the schools our kids go to, they don't breathe the air we breathe, they don't live in neighborhoods we live in. And that is what has changed in America. This, he mentions Kozol. An interview he had with the principal, one of the key principals in New York City, who's been there for a long time. And this principal said, we always have had funding inequality, inequities in New York City. But back in the 1970s, he said, I used to be able to go to the richest people in town. I could go to the richest, New Yorkers and say, hey, these poor schools on the poor side of town, they don't have computers, and we need to get some computers. So do you think you could kick down, you could donate some money to New York City schools so we can buy computers? And in the 70s, these rich people would say, yeah, that's unfair. That's not right that in America we have rich kids with computers over here, but poor kids, no. Yeah, how much do you need? I'll write a check. But nowadays, this same principle says, now that we're in the 90s, when Kozol was writing this, I can't just go to the rich people in town and say, it's unfair that the poor kids don't have what they need. Can you write a check? Nowadays, if I said that, the principal said, they're not gonna write a check. And you can think here, by the way, of Donald Trump. Donald Trump's one of the rich New Yorkers, one of the property developer, guy that cares about real estate. And if you went to Donald Trump, let's say, and said, hey, Don, buddy, can you donate $30 million to build this nicer school over here that's not falling apart. I mean, if you were trying to get a rich guy in New York City to care about the poor people in the Bronx, what could you say? Could you say it's unfair that the Bronx is being treated this way and doesn't have money, and therefore Donald Trump, you should give some money to the Bronx? Would that move him? Would that sway him? What would you say instead?
That it would create more like school funding, and then it would be like more,
Well, you guys probably haven't done much fundraising in your life, but when you're trying to get rich people to write a check, there's different little techniques you can do to get them to try and cough it up. And you could learn these are good skills to learn. Playing on their heartstrings, saying, well, it's unfair that this is happening. That's one way to do it, but this guy says it doesn't work anymore. So if you can't get them to care based on making them feel guilty or bad, what else other emotions might you use to get them to write a check? Yeah? Were you gonna answer? What else could you say? If you were trying to get people to donate money to a project, are people just gonna do it because they feel bad? Or is there another technique you can use? Here's why you should donate money, because
the children won't be criminal.
okay, what do you mean by that?
Like, if they don't get the funding, then their children can come and go into criminal activities.
Okay, yeah, that's exactly what this principal realized, is if you try to make it sound that it's unfair, then the rich people don't want to give money. But if you say, hey, Did you realize that when kids drop out of school, they're more likely to become criminals, and when they're more likely to be criminals, they're more likely to come rob you and kill you in your rich apartment on the other side of town? In other words, you could use guilt, that was the first method, but you're talking about using fear and self-interest. You know, another possibility would say, you know, it can help your reputation, like why don't you write a check and we'll name it the Donald Trump School or something like that, and you'll get a tax write-off, you won't have to pay money to the government, and you'll get your name on a building. That's a common way to get people to donate money, is for the glory of it, that you'll get your name on this thing. But that doesn't work in New York City because schools in the poor side of town aren't the thing that a rich guy like Donald Trump wants to have his name on. He wants to have it on Trump Tower, or maybe Trump Art, you know, Museum, or a Trump Music Hall, or something like that, but not, you know, Trump School in the poor part of town. You know, it doesn't give him much glory. His rich friends don't drive over there and see that name. So my point is vested interest means, this principle is saying, for people's own self-interest. That's why nowadays rich people will give to the schools, but not because they care about America, or care about fairness, or care about legitimizing meritocracy, as we talked about. They just care about, well, what's in it for me, bro? Oh, they're not gonna rob me? Okay, I'll give you some money. And so he just sort of laments that fact, this principle, that this just shows where we've come as a society. We used to care about these inequalities, and now we seem not to unless it directly affects us. The other example he gives is Mississippi. Mississippi tried to tax the oil industry, specifically Exxon. Now, if you ask about school funding, Mississippi used to be the lowest state. You can compare states. How much, so Mississippi used to have the lowest per capita funding, it's called. Per capita means per person, or literally per head. So you have this many students in Mississippi going to school, and this is how much money they're giving to their schools, and you divide that by the number of kids, and Mississippi used to have the lowest per capita funding of all the states. There's 50 states, and they were 50th. California, by the way, used to be #1. And we're going to talk soon in this class. California is now down near the bottom, like 45th. Why did California go from being a state where we used to give the most per student to a school that now gives very little? We'll talk about that in a little bit. But Mississippi was facing a situation where it was 50th in the country, and it was trying to say, Exxon, the big oil company, gas company, they drill a lot of oil in Mississippi. And a lot of states and countries, by the way, have done what's called an excise tax. It's basically saying, look, when you're digging all that oil, drilling all that oil out of our ground, you're affecting the citizens of Mississippi. You know, the citizens breathe the air that the oil industry creates. They are subject to the crashes of oil trucks on the road. They may suffer oil spills, as we have here in California, or fires caused by the oil industry. And so a lot of states have said, look, you guys are making huge amounts of money digging your oil out of our ground, but where is the benefit to the people living here? You guys are just taking without giving. And so a lot of states have said, oil industry, you should be taxed some of your profits. And those profits should be used to help the people. So in Alaska, if you live in Alaska, I don't know what the figure is now, but they have a tax on their oil industry. And I think the citizens of Alaska, each person gets like a check for like $5,000 or something like that every year. Here's your oil money. They do it differently in Norway. Norway is also an oil producing country, but they say that oil belongs to the people of Norway. That's called socialism, and Americans say we hate socialism. But Norway says, you know, Norway is Norway. It's a big piece of land that a lot of people live on. And so the oil under it shouldn't just belong to one private company that found it or found it first or something. It should belong to all the people that live there. And so in Norway, it's the government that drills the oil. The government makes tons of money drilling the oil. And then what do they use that money for? Free healthcare. All the people in Norway, you never have to pay for healthcare. If you're sick or anything, you just go in, get taken care of, and leave. free university. You don't ever have to pay for school or college in Norway. So that's called socialism when resources are pooled together so everybody can get a piece of it. And in America, a lot of Americans think they hate that idea. We don't like socialism. Well, this school is socialism, by the way. The idea that we all pay money into a fund to pay for community college so people can get free community college, that's socialism too. And I guess you guys like it because you're here. But anyway, so Norway, I think that would be cool if in America, instead of ExxonMobil getting to be the richest company in the world or one of them digging our oil, if Americans got like free healthcare and free transportation, other things like that, that oil could pay for. But anyway, and I feel that way coming from Santa Barbara, California, which is where the modern environmental movement was born, by the way. April 20th recently was Earth Day, and Earth Day started when there was a big oil spill in Santa Barbara that, the company didn't care. They were making a bunch of money. They didn't take care of their lines, their pipes, and so all the oil spread over all the beach and tons of animals died, and the beautiful beaches that everybody pays a lot of money to live in Santa Barbara for got covered with oil. And so people began to say, maybe we should start holding these companies accountable for the damage they're doing to the environment. And that's where environmentalism kind of got started with that. Well, so Mississippi tried to do that, and what did Exxon say? Exxon said, well, if you guys try to raise our taxes, we'll just leave. I mean, we own a bunch of oil fields in Mississippi. We'll just shut them down. We'll stop drilling oil here. We'll keep our oil fields, but we're not going to employ people. We're not going to drill the oil because we're a global company. We have oil fields all over the world, and if we're losing a little money in Mississippi, that's okay. We can make money somewhere else. So, are you sure you want to close? You sure you want to close down your oil fields by taxing us? And so the state of Mississippi said, "Sorry, just kidding." In other words, it's a vested interest, and this, by the way, is an example of what we called the race to the bottom earlier in this class. When big companies are global and can go anywhere they want, they can just tell local governments like Mississippi, F you, we're not paying your taxes. Go ahead and try. And so, but that means that the people of Mississippi have to just take it. Okay, we'll be the lowest funded place, we'll breathe your bad air, we'll deal with your oil spills. And so, but that's a sign that, we've broken this contract that Americans used to have between our wealthiest people paying taxes to the government so that working people could have the things they need. But the richest people have sort of said, nah, we're global now. We don't really care about the children of Mississippi or the children of the Bronx or American children in general, because that's not how we make our money. So it's an extension of points we made earlier in this class about how the wealthiest classes in America have changed their relationship to Americans. And so Kozol just kind of leaves it there. He doesn't have a solution other than to try to point out, we have these savage inequalities, even though we still claim to the rest of the world that we have equality in America. And by the way, we have, you may have heard the term DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's a term a lot of schools, including this one, use to say, we're trying to create more equity. We're trying to make it more possible for everybody to succeed, everybody to come here, everybody to succeed once they are here, everybody to move into higher things once they do. But interestingly enough, there are conservatives in this country, in places like Florida, that say it's terrible that we have DEI. We shouldn't be taking special efforts to make sure everybody can succeed. And so it's a bit of a battle in America these days still over, what does it mean to have equity in education? Why do we want equity? And how is equity different than equality, by the way? I mean, that's a big discussion we've been having lately. America has always said we're a country of equality, but now the term equity is pushing things in a little bit different direction. If you say equality, you say, like, equality would be, I gave everybody in here a desk, you all have desks, so that's equal, right? But equity is more like what Americans with Disability Act says. If I have a certain disability, you need to also address that, and you can't just give me the same test time as all the other students. Like, if I have a disability that makes me go slower, I should have more time for my test. And so that's equity, making sure people can succeed, not just providing the same for everybody, that's equality. But making sure everybody can succeed is more equity. And so there's been debates about that. Where are we on time? All right. So Kozol, you could say, was looking at things from a conflict theory perspective. He's definitely, as a conflict theorist, looking at the inequalities in our school system, pointing out the who has what in the society structurally, and kind of making a class analysis of how the wealthiest are dominating the poorest in America through the way that we've set up funding of our school system. But a second analysis I want to share with you comes from more of a symbolic interactionist standpoint. So it's not so concerned with how do we fund schools and how do people see each other, or who has what, but more the question of what's the meaning people attach to schools and how do they relate to each other in the school. And so this one is called The Debasing of Education. And it's by Barry Schwartz. Somebody have a question? Do I hear a voice? The debasing of education. So debasing is kind of a old-fashioned word. What does it mean to debase something? It means to kind of drag something through the mud. The term used to be used for women. It used to be mean somebody who lost their virginity before they were married was a debased woman. You lost your special value, your virginity, or whatever you want to call it. So what does it mean to talk about the debasing of education? Schwartz means we used to hold education up here as this almost sacred, wonderful, virtuous thing, like a virgin. And now we treat it like it's something that's not a virgin, somebody that you would find in the gutter. I won't use any terms for that kind of person, but that's what he's saying. We used to hold education up here on a pedestal, and now we just drag it through the mud and the gutter. And why? And if we've done that, a good question is, how have we done that? Why have we done that? And what is that doing to the kids, to the students? What do you mean by the debasing of education? Well, he starts with the idea that learning, at its best, is play. You think learning works best when it's play? Are we playing right now? You just yawned a little bit ago. And yawning is a thing I see a lot in schools. Is yawning what you do when you're playing? I mean, when you're playing, when we see people that play, are they going, no, usually they're like smiling and having fun and stuff like that. So what is play? And what do you think he means by saying that learning works best when it's play? I'm saying you're yawning because we're not treating this as play right now. This isn't play happening right now, and you guys have looks like people that aren't at play right now. And what is play? And
Like hands-on learning?
well, what is play? Like if we say learning works best as play, not as work. So we're really contrasting work and play here. Well, what is there between play and work? I mean, hands-on work is work. Hands-on learning. What's work? What's play? How do you know when you're working or playing?
Well, playing, you're having fun, you're having a good time. Work.
Good time, meaning what? Like my son plays video games a lot. Is that play? But is he having fun the whole time? Like sometimes he throws it at the wall, or I hope he doesn't, but he might want to. So is it always fun, play? I watch guys play basketball. Sometimes they're beating the crap out of each other. Playing basketball.
Football.
Yeah,
Doing something you enjoy.
okay, doing it in other what as opposed to what? I mean, I enjoy teaching. Am I playing right now or working? I mean, guys enjoy playing basketball, but is LeBron James playing basketball when he's in the NBA and the playoffs? Or what's he doing then? In other words, you enjoy it, but how's it different? What's the key difference that makes this work that I'm doing and not play? getting paid. In other words, play is something we do for intrinsic value, intrinsic reward, meaning the thing itself is the reward. Doing it is the reward. Like when I play ukulele, I go home a lot, when all my kids are asleep, my wife's in her bedroom, I like to play my ukulele. Does anyone want to hear me play ukulele? No. Would anyone pay me to play ukulele? No, I'm like maybe a stupid person. So it's not something I could do for money if I wanted to, probably. But I want to do it anyway. I do it because it's a reward for me. Each song I learn, I'm like, wow, I didn't know that song before, and now I know that song. Wow, I can play that song much easier now. Wow, I'm really flying on this song. That's pleasurable for me. It's a reward. Whereas if I were to go out on the street somewhere and play and try to get people to give me dollars in my hat or whatever, I think it'd be a lot more frustrating and maybe not that enjoyable. And it would probably I'd have to play songs I don't want to play, like songs I already know really well. But those are the ones that people want to hear, so they'll give me money, but it's not fun. I hate this song. I'm bored of it. I just want to go play the songs I don't know yet. That's what's fun. And so play is for its extrinsic reward. Intrinsic reward. Work we do for the extrinsic reward. Intrinsic, the reward is inside the thing itself. So ukulele playing is the reward for playing the ukulele. But are you in school right now because sociology is just something you needed to do? Like you had an itch and the only thing that would scratch it was some sociology? I don't think so. I think you came here because you needed to get to something else. I need to take sociology so I can fulfill my social and behavioral sciences requirement, so I can get my degree at the 2-year college, so I can transfer to the 4-year college, so I can get my degree in nursing, so I can get paid to be a nurse, so I can make a lot of money, so I can buy a house, so I can buy a big screen TV and watch Gilmore Girls. So you're here so that in 10 years you can watch Gilmore Girls on your couch? Then no wonder you're yawning. No wonder you don't want to be listening right now, because that's not why you're here. I'm not here to hear this guy talk about education. I'm here so I can make money as a nurse 10 years from now. So you see, so that's extrinsic. It's not what we're doing here is you being a nurse and sitting on your couch. We're doing something else, but that's not why you're here. So it's no wonder people don't want to be listening to the guy. They're yawning, they're like looking at their phone, they're doing other things because it's not intrinsically valuable to them. If you were playing video games, you're not like looking at your clock, oh, when's this over? You're playing the video game, you're into the video game. But when you're doing work and it's for the extrinsic thing, you're like, when's this over? When do I get to go do the thing I want to do? And so he says we used to, as a society, treat learning as intrinsically valuable, something that just by learning, you're getting something great. But we've more and more treated it as work. We've said the reason you should go to school is not because learning is great, but because getting a job is great, and getting money for your job is great, and even more importantly, buying stuff with your money is what's great. And so people are focused on stuff later, material gain and all that stuff, not focused on the sort of intrinsic rewards of knowing stuff that you didn't know before. And I have to go to the bathroom really bad, speaking of an intrinsic need for something, so if you don't mind. Sorry about that. I have some more to say, so I'll do that. There's speech. Yeah.
I don't think so yet.
What did you do?
I think it's first.
It's a group thing, right?
Yeah, I did my paragraph.
I'll do it.
I think She like broke it up between
I'll just type it. Check it.
Sorry about that, thank you for waiting. It was Teacher Appreciation Day, I think extra coffee they gave me was the problem. Anyway, so good question to ask if you buy this argument he's making so far that that learning works better when you really want to be learning the thing rather than doing it because you're fulfilling some extrinsic need outside of the learning. Maybe you can think about things you like to learn. And like video games are learning. The way you get better at them is playing them over and over and getting to know the track or the maze or the map or whatever it is that you're learning. You get better by learning in a video game. And are there other things you enjoy getting better at, learning more about, that you willingly go do? And how is that different, say, from the things you're kind of forced against your will to have to learn? And do those feel more like work? Or just thinking about the things you do for work and how is that experience different than the things you do for play? But a good question to ask is, what consequences does this have? Well, first of all, I'll ask this. What evidence does he use? So this is not a study, by the way. He didn't do an ethnography or numbers crunching or a survey or anything like that. It's more of an essay that Schwartz wrote. But good essays, just like good studies, have a thing they're trying to, understand better or persuade you of. And so a good essay should have evidence, We don't call it data. It's not like he just got data and analyzed it to see if it answered his question or not. But he's trying to persuade you, like an essay, that his view of things is the correct one. And so he wants to present evidence that backs him up. So what evidence is there that learning works better when it's intrinsically rewarded, rather than something that people do for the extrinsic reward? Well, one piece of evidence he uses are reading program studies, reading program evaluation studies. So program evaluation studies are a type of research that we haven't talked about. It's when you measure the effect of a particular program on something. So for example, like we have at Yuba College Puente program, some of you might have been in Puente program. We could evaluate that program and see, like, our students who go through Puente program, do they do better than students who didn't do it? Or do schools that have a Puente program, do they succeed better in various ways on outcomes than schools that don't have Puente program? You'd be evaluating the effectiveness of the Puente program if you studied it that way. Well, in this case, there's been a lot of studies of what are called reading programs or literacy programs, where they try to get people to read. reading is one of the key habits. If you have that habit of reading a lot, you will get smarter, whether you go to school or not. I mean, my parents were always really smart, and always people would ask me, how'd your parents get so smart? And I would ask them, how'd you guys get so smart? Well, a lot of reading. And but a lot of Americans don't value reading. They don't have books in their homes. Kids don't see their parents sitting there reading long periods. And so a lot of schools have said if we could just get kids to value reading more, then they will read and they will get smarter and they will do better in school. But how do you get kids to care about reading? So one program was called Bucks for Books. And this was compared to more traditional literacy program. What do you think Bucks for Books did? How do you think it tried to motivate kids to want to read? Paid them. Yeah, so they would say to the kids, you get $1 for every book that you successfully complete. And the way it works is we give you some books to choose from. You go pick them out. You go read them. And then we test you to see, did you understand what you read? Did you remember what you read? Did you continue reading, after the program was over? And the traditional reading program didn't pay people. It just said, we want you to pick a book out and we want to see, if you understood it, all those things. Well, what do you think would guide you if you were a kid being told you get paid $1 per book? And you come up to the bookshelf they give you with the books to choose. How are you going to choose which book to read? What are you looking for in a book when you're getting paid $1 per book?
Something easy to read.
Okay, so what would you look for? So you're looking for something small, something thin. What else? Is thin enough? Is that going to tell me what I need to know? What else?
It has like pictures.
Yeah, I don't want to just assume that because it's thin, maybe it has really tiny letters and there's a bunch of words in there. But I want to open it up and see, if it doesn't have a lot of words, if it's got more pictures, then that's going to be quicker. Those are all rational things a kid's thinking. I want to maximize the amount of bucks I get, and I want to minimize the time I'm spending reading. And so these kids were tested afterwards. Did you understood what you read? Did you remember what you read? Did you keep reading after this program was over? On the other hand, these kids were told, go pick a book out that you want to read. What would guide you then? You come up to the bookshelf, what's the first thing you're looking for? How big the book is, or what? What's the first thing you'd be looking for if you were told to read what you want to read?
The title.
The title, what's it about? I'm going to actually read the titles of these spines. You have to turn your head that way to read the spines instead of just looking for the biggest one or the thinnest one with the biggest, more pictures. I'm looking for what's it about. Oh, fish of the Pacific Ocean. Well, I really want to go fishing with my dad, and we were talking about going to the coast. I want to read about, and then they're tested afterwards. What did you get out of it? And in all these cases, the kids who just read for books didn't remember what they read, didn't necessarily understand what they read. And then when they stopped giving them bucks, they stopped reading the books. Whereas these kids said, yeah, I read all about Pacific fish. I learned about this fish, that fish, that fish. And then because it was so interesting, I told my dad about it, and he and I went on a fishing trip to the Pacific, and I got all excited, and then he said maybe next year we could go to the Atlantic, and so I got a book on the Atlantic fish, and I read that one. So not only did this kid understand it, it led to new relationships with his dad and new books that he himself wanted to go find. And so these are examples, and this wasn't just one kid, but throughout these studies, people getting paid don't really read. They're not really paying attention to what they read and don't really care and aren't doing it for the reading. They're doing it for the money. Whereas people are told to read for the information that it's giving them, and there's a lot of valuable things that can come. Just getting $1 isn't as valuable as getting to go fishing with your dad and having whole new things to talk about with your dad. way more valuable than the dollar. And so, so that's one piece of evidence that he gives, is that when these studies are done, it's continuously found that when you pay kids to read, it doesn't lead to literacy. It doesn't lead them to understand the value of reading and wanting to continue doing it. But there's other ways, other programs that do a pretty good job of getting kids to care about reading. Another piece of evidence he uses is his own daughter. So this is called what we would call anecdotal evidence. You'll hear that word sometimes in social science. It's usually said as a negative thing, like that's not good data that you have there, that's just anecdotal evidence. Anecdote is a story. So like if you heard from somebody, like I heard that it's not a good idea to pay kids $1 a book. Well, that you heard that, somebody told you it was an anecdote, that's very different from doing a program evaluation study where you collected the numbers and compared the numbers and all of that. So anecdotal data, which is like just things we've heard or people have told us, isn't the strongest kind of data for social scientists to be using. But in this case, it's not a study, it's an essay. And he's just relating a personal experience he's had. His daughter was in the car one day with the family. They were on a long family drive, and the mom and the dad were up front, and the daughter was in the back. And they noticed, the mom and dad, the daughter was making up these songs, like making up whole songs with song lyrics and sounds and singing them to herself. And they were like smiling at each other without her noticing, like, these are great songs she's coming up with. This is so cool. And so eventually they like turned around and said, that was so great, honey, do another song. And she's like, I got nothing. So like when she thought her parents weren't listening and she was just doing it for her own amusement, just to have fun making songs up, she was full of creativity and cool stuff. But when it became about making mom and dad happy, getting their applause and approval, then she clammed up and had nothing much to say or offer. And that's, that's a metaphor, you could say, for how a lot of education is. You take these very creative, interesting people in their real lives, we stick them in a room like this, and you're, what? I don't get it. And, I see it with kids. Kids have a natural love of learning. You could say about human beings is that that's what we're built to do, is to learn stuff. And that's what we want to do. If you ever watch a baby, what do babies do? Babies don't want to sit in your arms. Let me out of here. Let me go see what that is. What's that? What's that? What's that? What happens if I punch that? What if I pick that? What if I do this? What's that? Babies want to know what's going on. And they want to find stuff out. And they're testing stuff constantly. And human beings want to know stuff. If we see a hill, we're like, what's beyond that hill? What's up in that tree? What was that sound I just heard? Who made that? Are there more of those? Are they like those ones? I mean, we want to know stuff and learn stuff. Our brains are built for that. We're hungry for it. And you see it with little children. They love learning. They're learning language. They're learning skills. They're learning to walk. They're learning to understand things. They're building their knowledge. Then they get to school, your 4-year-old, your 5-year-old, and they come home and go, I hate school. I don't like learning. Like, this is a kid that loved learning until yesterday. Now they're at school and they're like, all their love of learning is just stamped out of them. Because we line you up in rows, we say, prove to the teacher that you know something. Who can do this? Oh, I can't do it as well as that one. I guess I'll shut up. I mean, we turn it into this whole extrinsic thing of proving to the teacher that you're good, proving to other people. It's not anymore about your intrinsic love of learning. It's about getting paid with something else, some approval, a grade. So we all care about our grade. Does the teacher think I'm good? What does the teacher want me to write about? What topic do you want me to cover? And so we spend so much time trying to please the people in charge or please the employer or whatever it is that we're not really pursuing our own learning for its own intrinsic value. And so so he says, based on this kind of data evidence, these studies, my own daughter, I'm convinced, he says, that we are going the wrong direction of emphasizing the money you can make from learning, the grades you can get, the money you can get, the job you can get. We should be emphasizing learning itself. We'll come back to the question of what are the consequences? So this was the evidence. If we tell students that the only thing that matters is the money you get later and the job you get later, what kinds of consequences? Like yawning is one, I think boredom. What other consequences? And we'll come back to that on Thursday. See you then. Be ready to get some work done on Thursday when you come back. We'll play, we'll have fun and play.